In the last 10 or 15 years, many changes have occurred in the lives of gay and lesbian Australians. Although much reform is still to come, in the last decade or so we have gone from being a marginalised and oppressed group constantly under threat of harassment, arrest, violence or worse, to becoming a community which loudly and vigorously campaigns for its rights, freedoms and place in Australian society. Many of those advances have come about due to changes in the law, changes put in place by the politicians we elect. This Saturday, we once again have the chance to have our say about the next government of Australia. Bent TV have selected candidates in 4 inner Melbourne electorates, plus a number of Senate hopefuls, and asked what can they offer the gay and lesbian community, and why do they deserve our vote?
Irrespective of your position in society, my freedoms and my liberties ought to be determined by the freedoms and liberties of the most oppressed groups in society. And I think at the present time in Australia, although some real advances have been made in recent years, I think it's still true to say that of the disadvantaged groups, I would put the Indigenous people first, but then I think in many parts of Australia that includes also members of the gay and lesbian community.
Look, I think that first and foremost that the gay and lesbian community require people who are grassroots, people who look at issues, not necessarily issues pertaining just to gay and lesbian community, because all policy issues affect the gay and lesbian community, whether it be foreign affairs or whether it be aged care or whether it be social security or employment.
Well, I am a socialist. I'm probably actually a communist. I would see myself as more being probably closer to communism. But I also, my general sort of attitudes are that I'm an inclusive sort of a person. I don't have prejudices against people for reasons of their race, their gender, their sexuality or anything like that. So I have left-wing politics.
All Australians should be equal before the law, and none of them should be discriminated against for gender or for sexuality or for race or any other characteristic. And so that's very much a bottom line of Democrat policies, and it flows through everything we do.
Well, I've been fairly active in supporting the interests of the gay and lesbian community in the time I've been in Parliament. Took a very strong stand on the bill with respect to the Tasmanian legislation, sexual privacy legislation. I've been lobbying very hard for almost 2 years now to try and get equal rights for same-sex partners with respect to superannuation and death benefits. That's a real problem for some people. It's not universal because there are some superannuation schemes where it's not such a problem. But in many super schemes, that's very definitely a big problem. And just generally taking a strong supportive position.
I think the first thing we can offer is to really continue to push our sexuality and anti-discrimination bill through. Since been got that bill going, and at this stage Liberal and Labor aren't commenting on whether or not they want it, or they're going to support it. But by lobbying, I think we can get it through. I think we can get enough people to support it. That's one area. I think it also just me being who I am, lesbian transsexual, means that it's very much in the public eye, and it's And so there's a very public statement that we are actually, as a party, very supportive of gay, lesbian people and culture. And in fact, here in Victoria, we're standing 3 gay candidates.
I'm committed to upholding the rights of individuals to live their lives as they would like to. I don't believe that the government has any right to interfere with the way that people want to live their lives, and that reflects the philosophy of the Liberal Party.
I can provide a visible gay man in Parliament, which I think is very important for a system of oppression which works around making gay and lesbians invisible. I can provide the same sort of visibility that Paul O'Grady did, an inspiration that a lot of people got from him. I can provide access to the facilities that we have at Parliament and access to community groups, and I can give us a representative voice in the Parliament.
The main thing that I can offer is, I guess, a positive attitude towards people being free to express their sexuality without fear of any recriminations, without fear of violence against them, without fear of discrimination in everyday areas of life, like trying to get a home loan or whatever other issues might come up.
Well, from working as a lawyer over the past 8 years, I have views about the need to strengthen the discrimination legislation. I have personal views about the need to strengthen the grounds on which discrimination cases can be taken under the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Act, and I personally would want to see that extended so that discrimination on sexual preference is clearly dealt with in that legislation and clearly outlawed. There is a need to renovate and reform the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Act more generally because of some recent cases. There is a question about the enforceability of Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission decisions. So the Act needs amendment anyway, and in view of the fact that it needs amendment, I think perhaps a more thorough overhaul is called for and an extension of the grounds upon which discrimination cases can be taken. Now that's a personal view and something that I would have to pursue within the Labor Party and more broadly, but I think that that would be of a very significant gain to the gay and lesbian community if we could make some advances in that area.
I'll continue to fight for the broadening, not only within Victoria but federally, and that affects Tasmania as well, for people to feel that they are able to walk the streets and not get, not the subject of vilification, abuse and so forth. I'll continue to fight for that.
I just think it's unbelievable that people should have a problem with what people do in their own private lives and their own homes. So whatever I can do to make sure that the community as a whole is accepting, and it is an educational process, that's certainly what I'll be working towards. And again, it's a bit like the Family Law Act. It's taken 20 years and that's now entrenched in mainstream, whereas 20 years ago you still had to prove fault in divorce. So I think education and understanding will go a long way.
Well, obviously discrimination and equality before the law is impacting on gay and lesbian communities, and that's something which Sid Spindler's bill, private member's bill, will address and should be coming up to Parliament in the next session. Well, I would expect the bill to be in Parliament before I get there. If I win this seat, I'll be in the Senate in July, and hopefully the bill will be through by then. I think in the future one of the areas we need to take some action on is the question of age of consent and getting an even age level across Australia. So that's something that we've targeted as being the next action, if you like. But first of all, it's the bill. Getting the bill through is the main action for the next few months for us.
Well, I think there's clearly one or two areas where the laws probably could be strengthened, but ultimately, in my view, the primary focus has always got to be on education, on public perceptions and attitudes being changed, and I think they clearly are changing. That is the underpinning that you need for things like anti-discrimination legislation. It was one of the great debates, for example, in the racial vilification legislation that was before the Parliament and is still before the Senate. And that is that's fine, but by itself, simply having legal structures that try to prevent certain forms of behaviour is insufficient unless you've also got a strong strategy of public education to change people's awareness.
So I'll be fighting very hard in Canberra to get through the legislation that Sid Spindler's recently created, which was introduced, I think, in November last year on sexual discrimination into the Parliament, and it's probably one of the best bills ever created in the world. Interestingly enough, the two major parties didn't want to have much to do with it before the election, so if and when I go to Canberra, I'll be making sure that we work very hard on that bill to get it through both houses of Parliament.
There should be legislation which means that there can be no discrimination in any area at all, which prevents it. If that was in place, you would then not have an ability to discriminate even in policy areas. So I don't think gays and lesbians should be singled out. They should be a part of the whole community and shouldn't be able to be discriminated against in any areas. So they should be, so for instance, any policy area should deal with any areas of discrimination that there exist in current legislation. If I was elected to Parliament, I would work very hard towards even presenting a private member's bill, I suppose, in changing legislation so there can't be discrimination.
I'm very concerned about areas where there's discrimination, and I do and I will make sure that those debates are open, that we're as frank and as free in our discussion as we can be, and not homophobic in our discussion. I believe that that the Liberal Party has actually set some precedences in the past. I think in 1973 it was a Liberal Party member who moved an anti-discrimination clause, and in fact I think Mr Keating voted against it at that time. So I think we have got a track record, and I think sometimes there's a myth about the fact that there are people within the Liberal Party, National Party, not able and capable of discussing these issues in a sane and sensible and mature way. And I think contributing to that sort of discussion in one of the two major parties is a very important contribution that I can make.
So, if we've become so popular that all the major parties are courting us, is there a choice to be made at all simply on lesbian and gay issues? The Labor Party believes in social justice and the safety net. Doesn't this mean a society that includes us? The Liberals believe in freedom of the individual. Aren't individual freedoms important to lesbians and gay men? The Democrats want to protect us from discrimination. Surely this is a good thing. What are the differences that will influence our vote?
The issues are really whether same-sex couples are to be regarded as equivalent to married couples or de facto heterosexual couples for a whole lot of purposes of law and purposes of things like superannuation, home loans, all of those sorts of nitty-gritty nuts and bolts issues. And I can see absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be.
I've got some problems, I'll be honest with you, about that as an issue, because I wonder if the community is quite ready to address that. I think that, again, by doing that, do you in fact discriminate against other people, and that is other people in what would be considered bona fide domestic relationships, sisters living together or mothers and daughters or whatever, and maybe we have to as a community debate that as an issue in toto, that maybe we need to look at, is there a different form a different way we need to look at people living together or sharing responsibility for each other.
I think there are times when the law has to lead, a bit like the safety belts thing, the law just leads things, and people are educated to see these things, and I really don't see why it should be anybody else's business anyway. I mean, it's a private thing.
Well, that's a contentious point, because the thing is that we don't actually have consensus in our community about that. There's a lot of people in our community who actually don't want that to occur, and I think what's important at this stage is that we actually have further consultation in that area, and we go around and we work out what our community actually wants, because we're going to disenfranchise a lot of people if we just assume that everybody wants legal equality on the basis of a heterosexual de facto relationship. So I think there's a lot more work to be done in that area.
I think the federal government may be constrained in what it can do by the Constitution, but subject to those caveats, I would, as I said already, in general support legislation that is designed to place the gay and lesbian community on the same footing as the heterosexual community.
Well, I think if you open up the question of discrimination on the grounds of sexual preference, then you really are necessarily saying people ought to be treated equally, irrespective of what form of relationship they live in or whether they live as a single person. Ironically, currently the law deals with discrimination on the grounds of marital status, but doesn't take that extra step of dealing with discrimination on the grounds of sexual preference. So I think if we focused on that question and were able to get some legislative change in that area, it would mean a substantial advance for same-sex couples.
Health is a huge issue, not just for the gay and lesbian community, but for everybody. But basically, we believe that that Medicare is a system that should be propped up. We shouldn't be moving over to a private insurance system, because we really believe that does discriminate against the poor end of the community. And as I said earlier, there's quite a large number of gays and lesbians who are unemployed, and so, you know, they would be discriminated against by moving to private health cover rather than to, you know, and pulling back the Medicare.
We as a community need to have a healthy community, and that includes making available to gay and lesbian community the services that they require.
Well, I think we have to ensure that lesbian women, for example, have equal access to health and equal education about breast screening, about all those sorts of issues, and also that the community at large, and in particular the gay community, about HIV. Michael Wooldridge has expressed some concern about the decline in the education program for HIV, and actually made a commitment to addressing that and to reviewing it.
Okay, let me just say first, what I'm about to say is not Green's policy. I don't believe that it's justifiable to prevent terminally, or people with what is normally a terminal disease, from having access to drugs that they wish to have access to. In other words, I think it's wrong and not justifiable to have the present system which says that until some government authority has approved a drug, it's not available. That, of course, is a system that operates here. It's a system that operates in the United States with FDA approval. I think it may be justifiable in cases where we're not talking about drugs for terminal diseases, but a disease that is normally terminal is a different case. I'm a strong opponent of paternalism. I think people ought to be able to make their own choices, and I therefore think that if a person who is HIV positive says, I want to try drug X, you know, and perhaps they've read the warnings about drug X, you know, they say, I realise that drug X is untested, unproven, that it may do me no good at all, it may even harm me, but nevertheless I think drug X offers a hope that no existing drug on the market offers, then I think that person should be able to get that drug.
Gay and lesbian people are pretty much like other Australian citizens in as much as they do have their own political preferment. I mean, there are a number of gay and lesbian people that I know who are Democrats, who are Greens, who are Liberals. Now, in that sense, they're like every other section of the Australian community, and they have to make their own choice. I believe that the advance that's taken place in their rights has been brought about by a sense of understanding, particularly within my own party.
I think all of our policies affect gay and lesbian people. I mean, this sounds like a non-answer, but I think we're always conscious of questions of rights for the gay community. In fact, The Democrats for 18 years have been amending legislation. We watch for any kind of discrimination in legislation and we're alert to it, and we move amendments to make sure that that legislation isn't discriminatory. We've done that for all of our period in the Senate. I have to say though that very often both the major parties vote against us, and often that those amendments don't get through. So we'll continue to do that.
Well, I think that all the policies so far have certainly helped. I mean, there's policies on Veterans Affairs, and you know, there are older people who would benefit from that, and also the employment one. I think, you know, the Liberal Party is very keen to rev up small business so that more people can be employed, and I think that that'll help everybody.
You know, the government and the Parliament can set this, in a way, can set what is going to happen in the community to a certain. They have a lot of influence, they have a lot of access to the media. It seems to me that that's where you should get the tolerance coming from about everything, including setting the standards about attitudes towards people who you know, like gays and lesbians. That sets the standard for the whole community in some ways. They're the leaders, and that so that's where we should be making sure that you don't get rednecks from Queensland and others who are able to make outrageous statements. And I think that they should be, you know, people like that should be dealt with and taken out of the political system, basically.
One thing I think that the gay and lesbian community could teach the rest of our society, and I think this applies to probably to a number of other groups as well, is a stronger notion of community and a stronger awareness of the rights of others and the importance of looking after other people. Clearly, I think the trauma of the AIDS epidemic has strengthened that, you know, so that in a sense, the sense of social responsibility, I think, that you find in the gay and lesbian community is stronger than it is in many other parts of the community.
A lot of the gay and lesbian community are in small business. A lot of them run enormously successful small business, especially in tourism and hospitality. And really the sort of pressure that's been on small business has in fact limited that sort of activity. And I mean, I'm sure you'll agree, in the trade, in the clothing industry, in arts, in galleries, in theatre, in music, in all sorts of small businesses, we'd find the gay and lesbian community represented. And I think they are looking for something to say, well, we want to express this, we want to be able to do something for Australia, we want to be able to contribute to employing people, but we can't because we've got to get government off our back.
I believe that if we accept that same-sex couples are to be regarded as heterosexual couples, then it follows that we ought to accept their rights to have children, either children of their own or to adopt children in the case of male couples. And we need to educate the public about that too. You know, we need to educate the public. We need to educate the public to see that the children brought up by same-sex couples come out very normally with the same range of sexuality by and large, and the same range of other views as children brought up by straight couples.
So, there you have it. Of course, none of the candidates we have spoken to will alone make or break the continuing advance of lesbian and gay issues over the next 3 years. They will all be constrained by their parties, the parliamentary process and political expediency. But the changes of the last 15 years are unlikely to be reversed, and the acknowledgement by the broader community that we have a voice and role in Australian society is only going to increase. Of course, gay and lesbian issues are not only advanced on the political front. Every day, members of our community take small but significant steps in the pub, the workplace and the local neighbourhood. But the next 3 years in politics will be important for us, just as the last decade or so has been. And the pollies know we're out there, and we're out there voting.